June 16, 1944, dawn breaking over Saipan's coral beaches, Mariana Islands. Lieutenant Colonel Takeshi Goto of the Japanese 9th Tank Regiment adjusted his binoculars and smiled with quiet confidence as he surveyed the American landing forces below. "Look at those strange tubes the Marines are carrying," he murmured to his aide, Captain Hiroshi Yamamoto. "American infantry with oversized bazookas. They must think they're hunting rabbits instead of Imperial tanks." What Goto didn't realize was that each of those rabbit hunting tools carried enough explosive power to penetrate 127 millimeters of steel armor, more than 4 times the thickness of his heaviest Type 97 Chiha medium tank. The morning sun cast long shadows across the battlefield as Japanese tank crews prepared for what would become the largest armored assault in the Pacific theater. Goto's regiment possessed 44 tanks, representing nearly half of Japan's remaining armor in the Central Pacific. These machines, primarily Type 95 Head-Go light tanks with their 6 to 12 mm armor plating, and Type 97 Chiha medium tanks with 8 to 33 mm of protection, had served the Emperor faithfully across China and Southeast Asia. Against Chinese forces armed with outdated anti-tank weapons, these steel monsters had proven virtually invincible, but the Americans waiting in the coral sand represented something entirely different from any enemy Japan had faced before. The weapon Lieutenant Colonel Goto so casually dismissed was the M1 bazooka, officially designated the 2.36-inch rocket launcher M1. This revolutionary shoulder-fired anti-tank weapon weighed only 13 pounds but delivered a shaped-charge high-explosive anti-tank warhead, capable of devastating any armored vehicle in the Japanese arsenal. The bazooka's development had begun in 1942 when American engineers, recognizing the urgent need for portable anti-tank weapons, combined rocket propulsion technology with shape-charge warheads to create something unprecedented in military history. Dr. Robert Goddard's rocket research, originally conducted for peaceful space exploration, had been weaponized with deadly efficiency. The M1 bazooka fired its rocket at 265 feet per second, delivering over 6,000 foot-pounds of explosive energy precisely where American infantry needed it most. Each Marine rifle company carried 6 bazookas, meaning that hundreds of these tank-killing weapons were now positioned across Saipan's beaches, waiting for the Japanese armor assault that military intelligence had predicted. Before we move on, please subscribe to help our channel get 1,000 subscribers. This is really important for us. Thanks in advance. Let's move on. The psychological preparation of Japanese tank crews reflected their military culture's emphasis on spiritual superiority over material considerations. Captain Yamamoto had written in his diary the previous evening, "Tomorrow we shall demonstrate the invincible spirit of Yamato against American materialism. Our tanks may be lighter than theirs, but our hearts are heavier with determination." This mindset, while admirable in its dedication, created a dangerous blind spot regarding enemy capabilities. Japanese military doctrine emphasized close combat engagement, where superior fighting spirit could overcome technological disadvantages. A philosophy that worked effectively against Chinese and Southeast Asian opponents, but would prove catastrophically inadequate against American industrial innovation. The technical specifications told a story of impending doom that Japanese commanders either couldn't or wouldn't recognize. The Ha-Go light tank, weighing only 7.4 tons, carried a 37 mm main gun and possessed maximum armor thickness of 12 mm on its frontal arc. The Chiha medium tank, at 15 tons, mounted a 47 mm gun with 33 mm of frontal armor protection. These specifications had been adequate for fighting in Manchuria and Burma, where enemy anti-tank weapons consisted primarily of outdated artillery pieces and improvised explosive devices. American bazookas rendered such armor protection meaningless. The shape-charge warhead created a focused jet of molten metal, traveling at hypersonic velocity, easily punching through Japanese armor, regardless of angle or distance within effective range. What Japanese tank crews considered impenetrable steel protection was, in reality, little more than decorative metal sheeting against American rocket-propelled weaponry. The morning briefing in Lieutenant Colonel Goto's command post revealed the full scope of Japanese misconceptions about American capabilities. Intelligence reports described Marine infantry as poorly trained conscripts carrying experimental weapons of questionable effectiveness. These assessments, filtered through multiple levels of command hierarchy that discouraged contradicting superior officers, painted a picture of American forces as technologically advanced but tactically incompetent. Their bazookas are too heavy for practical battlefield use, read one intelligence summary. American soldiers lack the physical stamina and mental discipline for close-quarters tank hunting. Such evaluations demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of American military philosophy. While Japanese doctrine emphasized individual heroism and spiritual dedication, American strategy focused on technological superiority and coordinated firepower. The bazooka represented this philosophical difference perfectly. Instead of requiring soldiers to approach tanks with explosive charges or magnetic mines, American engineers had created a weapon that could destroy armor from safe distances with minimal training and maximum effectiveness. The irony was that Japan's own engineers had developed similar rocket-propelled weapons, including the Type 4 70mm anti-tank rocket launcher, but production limitations and resource constraints had prevented widespread deployment. By June 1944, American factories were producing over 10,000 bazookas per month, while Japan struggled to manufacture sufficient ammunition for their existing weapons. This industrial capacity gap would prove as decisive as any tactical innovation. As dawn approached and Japanese tanks began their engines for the assault, the sound of American preparations drifted across the battlefield. Marines were checking their bazookas, loading high-explosive anti-tank rockets, and coordinating firing positions with deadly efficiency. Each two-man bazooka team, one loader, one gunner, had trained extensively in tank hunting tactics. They knew precisely where to aim for maximum effectiveness: track systems, engine compartments, and ammunition storage areas. Most importantly, they understood that Japanese armor was vulnerable to bazooka attack from any angle at ranges up to 300 yards. The stage was set for a technological demonstration that would fundamentally alter Pacific theater warfare. Japanese confidence in their armored forces was about to meet American industrial innovation in the most brutal way possible. Lieutenant Colonel Goto's casual dismissal of American rabbit hunting tools would soon transform into desperate recognition of a weapons system that rendered traditional tank warfare obsolete. The coral beaches of Saipan were about to witness the violent intersection of two military philosophies: Japanese spiritual determination against American technological supremacy, with results that would echo through the remainder of World War II and beyond. The story of the American bazooka began not in military laboratories, but in the quiet workshops of civilian scientists, who understood that modern warfare demanded revolutionary solutions to age-old problems. Dr. Robert Hutchings Goddard, the man later called the father of modern rocketry, had spent decades perfecting rocket propulsion systems at his research facility in Roswell, New Mexico. His work, initially dismissed by military officials as Buck Rogers' fantasy, would ultimately provide the foundation for America's most effective infantry anti-tank weapon. In 1935, Goddard had achieved something thought impossible: sustained, controlled rocket flight. His liquid-fueled rockets reached altitudes of 7,600 feet, traveling at speeds exceeding 700 miles per hour. While the scientific community celebrated these achievements, military applications remained largely theoretical until the outbreak of World War II forced American engineers to reconsider every available technology for potential weapons development. The breakthrough came in May 1942, when Captain Edward Ewell and Colonel Leslie Skinner of the United States Army Ordnance Corps visited Goddard's research facility. They witnessed a demonstration of a small rocket motor that could propel a 3-pound projectile with remarkable accuracy and devastating impact force. "This changes everything," Skinner wrote in his classified report. "We're not just looking at a new weapon, we're looking at the future of infantry warfare." The engineering challenge was immense. Traditional anti-tank weapons required massive artillery pieces or specialized vehicles to deliver sufficient explosive force against armored targets. The German Panzerfaust and Soviet anti-tank rifles demonstrated that portable weapons could be effective, but they suffered from limited range, excessive weight, or dangerous recoil that compromised operator safety. American engineers needed something different: a weapon that ordinary infantrymen could carry, operate effectively with minimal training, and use repeatedly without exhaustion or injury. The solution emerged from an unlikely combination of technologies. Goddard's rocket propulsion system provided the delivery mechanism, while the shaped charge warhead technology, originally developed for demolition work in mining operations, supplied the destructive power. The shaped charge, also known as the Monroe effect, after its discoverer, focused explosive energy into a high-velocity jet of molten metal capable of penetrating steel armor far thicker than the warhead itself. The mathematics were staggering. A 2-pound shaped charge warhead could generate penetration equivalent to a traditional artillery shell weighing 10 times as much. The physics involved creating a precise copper cone inside the explosive charge that, when detonated, formed a hypersonic jet of molten copper traveling at over 25,000 feet per second. This jet could punch through 12 inches of hardened steel armor as easily as a knife cutting through paper. Development proceeded with unprecedented speed. By October 1942, the first prototype M1 bazookas were undergoing field testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. Test results exceeded every expectation. The weapon consistently penetrated 4 inches of homogeneous steel armor at ranges up to 300 yards, while weighing only 13 pounds and requiring just 2 operators. "We've created a tank killer that any soldier can carry," reported Major General Gladion Barnes, Chief of Army Ordnance Research and Development. The production challenge was equally remarkable. American industrial capacity, already mobilized for maximum wartime output, had to retool existing factories to manufacture an entirely new class of weapon. The Westinghouse Electric Corporation's Baltimore facility was chosen as the primary production center, with additional manufacturing contracts awarded to General Electric and International Harvester. These companies had never built military weapons before, but their expertise in precision manufacturing and quality control made them ideal for bazooka production. The numbers told the story of American industrial supremacy. By December 1942, 3 months after production began, American factories were manufacturing 1,000 bazookas per month. By June 1943, monthly production exceeded 5,000 units. By the time of the Saipan invasion in June 1944, total bazooka production had reached 112,000 units, with monthly rocket production exceeding 800,000 rounds. This production achievement became even more impressive when compared to Axis capabilities. Germany's entire Panzerfaust production from 1943 to 1945 totaled approximately 6 million units, a substantial number, but produced over 30 months by the combined industrial resources of occupied Europe. American factories produced 15.6 million bazooka rockets in just 24 months, using only a fraction of total industrial capacity, while simultaneously manufacturing tanks, aircraft, ships, and countless other military supplies. The technical specifications revealed why American bazookas would prove so devastating against Japanese armor. The M6A1 high-explosive anti-tank rocket carried a 3.4-pound warhead containing 1.6 pounds of Composition B explosive, a mixture of RDX and TNT that was 30% more powerful than pure TNT. The shaped charge design concentrated this explosive force into a copper jet with a diameter of only 6 millimeters, but capable of maintaining coherence and penetrating power through 12 inches of armor steel. Japanese tank designers had never encountered weapons with such penetration capabilities. The Type 95 Heigo light tank, which formed the backbone of Japanese armored forces, possessed maximum armor thickness of only 12 millimeters, less than 1/10 the penetration capability of a single bazooka rocket. Even the heavily armored Type 97 Chiha medium tank, with 33 millimeters of frontal protection, was completely vulnerable to bazooka attack from any angle. The psychological impact on American forces was transformational. Previously, infantry soldiers had viewed enemy tanks as nearly invulnerable death machines, requiring air support or friendly armor to neutralize. The bazooka gave ordinary foot soldiers the power to destroy tanks independently, fundamentally changing battlefield dynamics and boosting infantry confidence. "For the first time, we weren't running from enemy armor, we were hunting it," recalled Sergeant James Mitchell of the 4th Marine Division, who would later destroy 3 Japanese tanks during the Saipan invasion. Training programs developed specifically for bazooka operations reflected this psychological shift. The United States Army Infantry School at Fort Benning, Georgia, established specialized courses teaching tank hunting tactics, camouflage techniques, and coordinated bazooka attacks. Marines at Camp Pendleton, California, practiced against captured Japanese tanks, obtained through intelligence operations, learning optimal firing positions and ammunition selection for maximum effectiveness against specific armor types. The tactical doctrine emerging from these training programs emphasized patience, positioning, and precision over aggressive frontal attacks. Bazooka teams learned to identify tank vulnerabilities, track systems that could be disabled to immobilize targets, engine compartments where fires could be started, and ammunition storage areas where secondary explosions could be triggered. Most importantly, they learned that Japanese tanks, unlike their German counterparts, lacked effective anti-infantry protection and could be approached closely by determined soldiers using proper cover and concealment. Intelligence reports from captured Japanese documents revealed enemy misconceptions about American anti-tank capabilities. A classified Japanese Army assessment from March 1944 described American bazookas as experimental weapons of limited battlefield value due to excessive weight and complicated operation procedures. Japanese military planners estimated that American soldiers would require extensive specialized training and dedicated logistical support to operate bazookas effectively in combat conditions. These assessments proved catastrophically wrong. Basic bazooka operation could be mastered in less than 4 hours of training, and the weapon's simplicity made field maintenance minimal. The two-man team concept, one gunner, one loader, provided redundancy and allowed for rapid reloading under combat stress. Most significantly, bazookas required no external power source, complex fire control systems, or specialized ammunition storage beyond normal infantry supply chains. The contrast with Japanese anti-tank capabilities was stark. Japan's primary infantry anti-tank weapon remained the Type 99 rifle grenade, a small explosive charge fired from standard infantry rifles. This weapon could penetrate only 30 millimeters of armor under ideal conditions, and required soldiers to approach within 50 yards of target tanks, well within effective range of enemy machine guns and support weapons. Japanese soldiers armed with rifle grenades faced almost certain death when engaging American Sherman tanks with their 76 millimeters of frontal armor and coordinated infantry support. By the spring of 1944, American bazooka production had reached such levels that every Marine and Army infantry company deployed to the Pacific Theater carried at least 6 bazookas with 100 rockets per weapon. This represented unprecedented anti-tank firepower for infantry units, equivalent to having 6 mobile artillery pieces capable of destroying any enemy armored vehicle within sight range. The final preparations for the Saipan invasion included extensive bazooka training specifically designed for Pacific Theater conditions. Marines practiced firing from coral caves, coordinating attacks with flamethrower teams, and engaging multiple targets in rapid succession. They learned that Japanese tanks typically operated in small groups without adequate infantry support, making them vulnerable to coordinated bazooka ambushes from concealed positions. As transport ships carried thousands of Marines towards Saipan's beaches, their cargo holds contained weapons that would revolutionize Pacific warfare. Each bazooka represented decades of scientific research, months of engineering development, and the combined industrial might of American manufacturing. The Japanese tank crews waiting on Saipan had no comprehension of what was approaching their positions, technological superiority so overwhelming that traditional concepts of armored warfare would become obsolete within hours of first contact. The first shots of the Battle of Saipan erupted at 0630 hours on June 15, 1944. When the pre-invasion naval bombardment began pulverizing Japanese defensive positions. For 16 hours, American battleships, cruisers, and destroyers fired over 165,000 shells into Saipan's coral ridges and concrete bunkers. Lieutenant Colonel Takeshi Goto, commanding the 9th Tank Regiment from his reinforced command post 3 miles inland, felt each explosion shake the ground beneath his feet like earthquake tremors. The Americans waste ammunition like children playing with firecrackers, Goto remarked to his operations officer, Major Kenji Nakamura, as they studied situation reports from forward observers. Their naval gunfire destroys empty positions while our tanks remain hidden in caves, waiting for the proper moment to strike. This assessment reflected traditional Japanese tactical thinking: endure the bombardment, preserve forces, then launch decisive counterattacks when enemy troops became vulnerable during landing operations. What Goto couldn't know was that American intelligence had identified every major Japanese tank position through aerial reconnaissance and radio intercepts. The naval bombardment, rather than being wasteful, was systematically destroying supply routes, communication lines, and escape routes that Japanese armor would need for effective maneuvering. More crucially, the bombardment was forcing Japanese tanks to remain in concealed positions where they would be vulnerable to close-range infantry attacks with bazookas. The actual invasion began at 0844 hours on June 15, when the first wave of Marines hit Red Beach 1 and Green Beach 1 under intense Japanese artillery fire. Among the assault forces were elements of the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions, each carrying their full complement of bazookas and high-explosive anti-tank rockets. Private First Class Robert Chen of the 6th Marine Regiment later wrote in his diary, "We could see Japanese tanks moving in the tree line about 500 yards inland. They looked like toys from the beach. But we knew our bazookas could reach them easy." The Japanese response followed predetermined defensive plans developed months earlier by Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, commanding all Japanese forces on Saipan. These plans called for immediate counterattacks against American beachheads before enemy forces could establish secure positions and bring heavy equipment ashore. At 14:30 hours, Saito issued the order that would seal the fate of Japanese armored forces in the Pacific. All tank units will advance immediately and drive the invaders back into the sea. Lieutenant Colonel Goto received this order with mixed emotions. His tactical experience suggested that daylight tank attacks against prepared enemy positions were extremely hazardous, particularly when those positions included naval gunfire support and air cover. However, Bushido tradition demanded obedience to superior orders, and the concept of defensive warfare contradicted fundamental Japanese military philosophy. "We attack at dawn," Goto told his tank commanders. "The Americans have many weapons, but they lack the fighting spirit of the Imperial Army." The first Japanese tank to encounter an American bazooka was a Type 95 Hago light tank, commanded by Sergeant Hiroshi Tanaka of the 3rd Tank Company. At 06:15 hours on June 16, Tanaka's tank emerged from concealed positions near the village of Charinkanoa and began advancing toward Marine positions approximately 800 yards away. The tank moved slowly across rough coral terrain, its 37mm gun searching for targets among the American defensive positions. Corporal James Murphy of the 23rd Marine Regiment watched the approaching tank through his binoculars from a concealed position behind a coral ridge. "I couldn't believe how small it looked," Murphy later recalled. "Back at Camp Pendleton, we'd trained against captured German panzers that were twice as big and 3 times as heavily armored. This Japanese tank looked like something you'd see in a training film, not real combat." Murphy's bazooka team, consisting of himself as gunner and Private First Class Anthony Ritchie as loader, had prepared their firing position during the night, selecting a location with clear fields of fire and multiple escape routes. The M1 bazooka they carried had been manufactured at the Westinghouse plant in Baltimore just 6 weeks earlier and had never been fired in combat. The high-explosive anti-tank rocket loaded in the tube contained enough explosive power to destroy any Japanese armored vehicle ever built. "Range about 400 yards, and closing," Murphy whispered to Ricky as they tracked the approaching tank. "We'll let him get to 200 yards, then take the shot." This decision reflected excellent tactical judgment. At 200 yards, the bazooka rocket would retain maximum penetrating power, while the target would be large enough for precise aiming. Most importantly, Japanese return fire would be less accurate at that range due to the movement and vibration of the tank itself. Sergeant Tanaka, meanwhile, was experiencing his first encounter with American defensive tactics. Unlike Chinese and Southeast Asian enemies who typically fled when confronted by Japanese armor, the Americans seemed to be deliberately allowing his tank to approach their positions. "Where are their anti-tank guns?" Tanaka wondered aloud to his gunner, Corporal Matsuo Yamada. Intelligence reports indicated they would have many heavy weapons. The answer to Tanaka's question lay hidden in coral caves and behind fallen palm trees throughout the area. Dozens of Marine bazooka teams were tracking every Japanese tank movement, coordinating their attacks through portable radios, and waiting for optimal firing opportunities. This represented a fundamental shift in infantry tactics. Instead of avoiding enemy armor, American forces were actively hunting tanks with weapons specifically designed for the purpose. At exactly 06:22 hours, Murphy squeezed the trigger of his bazooka. The M6A1 rocket erupted from the tube with a distinctive whoosh sound, propelling its shape-charged warhead toward the Japanese tank at 265 feet per second. The rocket's flight time to target was approximately 2.3 seconds, long enough for Tanaka to see the approaching projectile and realize his tank was under attack, but far too short for any evasive action. The explosion was devastating beyond anything Japanese tank crews had experienced. The shape-charged warhead struck the Hago tank's frontal armor at a 90-degree angle and instantly penetrated the 12mm steel plating. The hypersonic copper jet created by the explosion burned through the tank's interior like a blowtorch, igniting ammunition, fuel, and everything else it contacted. The tank's ammunition storage exploded 3.7 seconds after the initial impact, blowing the turret completely off the chassis and killing all 3 crew members instantly. "Jesus Christ," whispered Private Ritchie as he watched the fireball engulf the Japanese tank. "Did we really do that with just one shot?" The psychological impact on both sides was immediate and profound. For American forces, the bazooka's effectiveness exceeded every training scenario they had experienced. For Japanese observers, the destruction of a tank by infantry weapons challenged fundamental assumptions about armored warfare. Major Nakamura, observing the tank's destruction through powerful field glasses from the regimental command post, immediately contacted Lieutenant Colonel Goto by radio. "Sir, 3rd Company's lead tank has been destroyed by some kind of American rocket weapon. The explosion was enormous, much larger than anything we've seen from their rifle grenades or anti-tank rifles." Goto's response revealed the cognitive dissonance that would plague Japanese commanders throughout the Pacific campaign. "Impossible," he replied. "American infantry weapons cannot destroy our tanks. The crew must have hit a landmine or been struck by naval gunfire. Order 3rd Company to continue the advance immediately." This denial of obvious evidence reflected deeper problems in Japanese military culture. Admitting that American infantry possessed weapons capable of easily destroying Japanese tanks would require acknowledging technological inferiority that contradicted core beliefs about Japanese martial superiority. Rather than adapting tactics to address new threats, Japanese commanders often chose to ignore evidence that challenged established doctrine. The 2nd Japanese tank to encounter American bazookas met an even more decisive fate. Captain Yoshio Suzuki's Type 97 Chiha medium tank was approaching Marine positions near Hill 57 when it came under coordinated attack from 3 separate bazooka teams positioned at different angles. The first rocket struck the tank's left track system, immobilizing the vehicle and preventing escape. The second rocket penetrated the engine compartment, starting a fuel fire that filled the crew compartment with toxic smoke. The third rocket struck the turret directly, penetrating the 33mm armor and killing the gunner and loader instantly. Captain Suzuki, the only survivor, managed to escape through the commander's hatch before the tank's ammunition exploded. He was captured by Marines 30 minutes later and became one of the first Japanese tank commanders to provide detailed intelligence about enemy reactions to American bazookas. "The rockets came from everywhere," Suzuki told his interrogators. "We had no warning, no time to react. Our armor was useless, like paper against fire." The interrogation reports from captured Japanese tank crews revealed the full extent of enemy unpreparedness for American anti-tank weapons. Most Japanese tankers had never heard of shape-charge warheads or understood how bazooka rockets could penetrate armor far thicker than the warhead itself. Their training focused on engaging other tanks and fixed fortifications, not on defending against infantry attacks with sophisticated weapons. By midday on June 16, 8 Japanese tanks had been destroyed by American bazookas, with 0 American casualties from tank fire. This kill ratio was unprecedented in modern armored warfare and reflected the devastating effectiveness of American anti-tank weapons against obsolete Japanese armor. More significantly, it demonstrated that technological superiority could overcome numerical advantages and traditional tactical expertise. The psychological impact on Japanese forces extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Radio intercepts captured increasingly desperate communications between Japanese tank commanders and their superiors. "Request immediate withdrawal to defensive positions," transmitted Major Ichiro Watanabe of the 2nd Tank Company. "American infantry weapons are destroying our tanks faster than we can engage targets." These requests were consistently denied by higher command, which continued to insist that tank attacks must continue regardless of losses. Lieutenant General Saito's headquarters issued orders stating, "Tank crews will advance with determination and fighting spirit. Temporary setbacks are normal in combat operations. The enemy's weapons are not superior to Japanese determination." Such orders reflected the fundamental disconnect between Japanese military philosophy and battlefield reality. While spiritual determination remained important for military success, it could not overcome the basic physics of shape-charge warheads penetrating steel armor. American bazookas were destroying Japanese tanks not through superior fighting spirit, but through superior technology applied with intelligent tactics. The afternoon of June 16 witnessed the largest Japanese tank attack in Pacific theater history, as Lieutenant Colonel Goto committed his entire remaining force of 36 tanks to a coordinated assault on American positions. This attack, planned as the decisive blow that would drive invading forces back into the ocean, instead became a demonstration of American technological dominance that would influence Pacific strategy for the remainder of the war. Marine bazooka teams had spent the morning studying Japanese tank tactics and positioning themselves for maximum effectiveness against massed armor attacks. They identified approach routes, established overlapping fields of fire, and coordinated with supporting weapons including mortars, machine guns, and naval gunfire. Most importantly, they had learned from the morning's engagements that Japanese tanks lacked effective anti-infantry weapons and could be approached to point-blank range by determined soldiers. The result was a slaughter that shocked both sides with its one-sided intensity. In less than 30 minutes, American bazookas destroyed 29 of the 36 attacking Japanese tanks, with the remaining 7 vehicles retreating in complete disorder. Japanese casualties exceeded 150 killed or wounded, while American losses totaled 3 Marines killed and 11 wounded, none from Japanese tank fire. Corporal Murphy, whose bazooka team accounted for 4 tank kills during the afternoon battle, later wrote to his family, "It wasn't even a fair fight. Their tanks were so thin that our bazookas went right through them like they were made of tin cans. I almost felt sorry for the Japanese crews, but then I remembered Pearl Harbor and kept shooting." The destruction of Japanese armored forces on Saipan marked a turning point in Pacific theater warfare. Never again would Japan attempt large-scale tank operations against American forces, recognizing that their armor was simply too vulnerable to survive contact with bazooka-equipped infantry. This tactical shift forced Japanese defensive strategy to rely increasingly on fortified positions and infantry weapons, abandoning the mobile warfare concepts that had proven successful in earlier campaigns. Lieutenant Colonel Goto, one of only 7 Japanese tank commanders to survive the day's fighting, spent his final hours writing a detailed report about American anti-tank capabilities. "The enemy possesses weapons that render our armor obsolete," he wrote. "No amount of fighting spirit can overcome rockets that penetrate our thickest steel like arrows through rice paper. Future operations must account for this reality or face certain destruction." This report, recovered by American intelligence after the battle, provided valuable insight into Japanese thinking about technological warfare. More importantly, it confirmed that American bazookas had achieved their primary objective, neutralizing enemy armor while giving ordinary infantry soldiers the confidence and capability to hunt tanks independently. The annihilation of Japanese armor on Saipan sent shockwaves through the Imperial Japanese Army command structure that reverberated far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Within 72 hours of the tank massacre, classified reports were racing across the Pacific to Tokyo, carrying news that would fundamentally alter Japanese strategic planning for the remainder of World War II. General Hideki Tojo, serving simultaneously as Prime Minister and War Minister, received a personal briefing on June 19 that left him speechless for several minutes. "Honorable Prime Minister," reported Colonel Takeo Imai, Chief of Pacific Theater Intelligence, "our armored forces on Saipan have been virtually eliminated by American infantry weapons, 37 tanks destroyed in 2 days, with minimal American casualties. The enemy possesses rocket weapons that penetrate our heaviest armor as easily as rifle bullets pierce paper screens." Tojo's reaction epitomized the psychological crisis gripping Japanese military leadership. For 3 years, Japanese forces had dominated Pacific battlefields through superior tactics, fighting spirit, and effective use of combined arms operations. The sudden revelation that American infantry could destroy Japanese tanks at will challenged fundamental assumptions about military technology and Japanese martial superiority. "Impossible," Tojo declared, slamming his fist on the conference table. "American soldiers are individually inferior fighters. Their weapons may be numerous, but they lack the spiritual strength to use them effectively in close combat." This response reflected the cognitive dissonance that would paralyze Japanese strategic thinking throughout the remainder of the war. An inability to accept that technological superiority could overcome traditional military virtues. The psychological impact on surviving Japanese tank crews was even more devastating than the material losses. Sergeant Major Kenji Hayashi, one of only 12 tank commanders to escape the Saipan disaster, provided detailed testimony during post-war interrogations that revealed the depth of Japanese demoralization. "We had trained for years to fight enemy tanks and artillery," Hayashi recalled. "No one prepared us for invisible enemies with weapons that could destroy our machines from any direction without warning." This testimony highlighted a crucial weakness in Japanese military training: excessive focus on conventional threats while ignoring innovative enemy weapon systems. Japanese tank crews had practiced extensively against simulated attacks by enemy armor, anti-tank guns, and aircraft, but never against infantry armed with portable rocket weapons. The result was tactical paralysis when confronted with threats outside their experience and training. The broader strategic implications became apparent during a series of high-level conferences held in Tokyo during July 1944. Lieutenant General Akira Muto, Deputy Chief of the Army General Staff, presented analysis that painted a grim picture of Japanese prospects against American forces equipped with bazookas. "If enemy infantry can destroy our tanks independently," Muto argued, "then mobile defense operations become impossible. We must transition to static fortifications and underground positions where American rocket weapons cannot be employed effectively." This strategic shift represented a complete reversal of Japanese military doctrine. Since the Manchurian campaigns of the 1930s, Japanese strategy had emphasized rapid movement, aggressive attacks, and the use of armor to exploit breakthrough opportunities. The bazooka's effectiveness against Japanese tanks forced abandonment of these proven tactics in favor of defensive strategies that played to American strengths in firepower and industrial production. The transition was neither smooth nor successful. Japanese engineers began immediate construction of elaborate underground fortification systems on remaining Pacific islands, including Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and the Philippines. These positions, while impressive in their complexity and defensive strength, represented a fundamental admission that Japanese forces could no longer compete with American technology in mobile warfare. Colonel Yahara Hiromichi, senior operations officer for the 32nd Army defending Okinawa, exemplified this new defensive mindset in his planning documents from August 1944. "American bazooka weapons make traditional tank operations suicidal," Yahara wrote. "Our armor must be dug into prepared positions and used as stationary artillery. Mobile counterattacks are no longer feasible against enemy forces equipped with these rocket weapons." The American response to Japanese tactical changes revealed the broader strategic impact of bazooka effectiveness. Major General Curtis LeMay, commanding 21st Bomber Command, noted in his operational reports that Japanese defensive positions were becoming increasingly concentrated and vulnerable to air attack. "When the enemy stops moving," LeMay observed, "he becomes a stationary target for our bombing campaigns. Their new defensive strategy plays directly into our tactical strengths." This observation proved prophetic during subsequent Pacific campaigns. Japanese forces, denied the mobility that had previously allowed them to avoid concentrated American firepower, found themselves trapped in elaborate fortifications that became death traps under sustained bombardment. The bazooka, by forcing Japanese abandonment of mobile tactics, had inadvertently made enemy positions more vulnerable to American air and naval power. The industrial implications were equally significant. Japanese tank production, already constrained by material shortages and bombing damage to manufacturing facilities, virtually ceased during the final year of the war. If existing armor could not survive contact with American infantry, there was little point in continuing expensive and resource-intensive tank manufacturing programs. Japanese production statistics revealed the scope of this industrial shift. Tank production, which had peaked at 210 units per month in early 1944, dropped to fewer than 30 units per month by December 1944. Resources previously allocated to armor manufacturing were redirected toward aircraft production, coastal defense guns, and underground fortification construction, all defensive measures reflecting acknowledgement that Japanese forces could no longer challenge American technological superiority directly. The contrast with American industrial expansion was stark. While Japanese tank production collapsed, American factories were producing over 1,000 Sherman tanks per month, along with thousands of bazookas and millions of rockets. This industrial disparity, magnified by the effectiveness of American anti-tank weapons, created an insurmountable strategic advantage that Japanese planners could no longer ignore. Personal accounts from Japanese soldiers revealed the psychological trauma inflicted by encounters with American bazookas. Private First Class Hiroshi Nakajima, captured during the Battle of the Philippines in January 1945, described his unit's reaction to reports of bazooka attacks. When we heard that American foot soldiers could destroy our tanks with handheld weapons, many men began to question whether the war could be won. If our heaviest armor was useless, what hope did we have with rifles and machine guns? This demoralization was particularly severe among Japanese officers, who had been trained to believe in the superiority of Japanese weapons and tactics. Captain Masao Yoshida, formerly a tank company commander, wrote in his diary after witnessing bazooka attacks during the Battle of Luzon, "The Americans possess weapons beyond our understanding. Our tanks, which seemed invincible against Chinese and British forces, are destroyed like children's toys by enemy infantry. How can we maintain fighting spirit against such overwhelming technological advantage?" The propaganda implications created additional challenges for Japanese leadership. For 3 years, Japanese media had emphasized American industrial weakness and technological inferiority compared to Japanese martial virtues. The sudden revelation that American weapons were devastating Japanese forces required careful management to prevent complete collapse of civilian and military morale. Japanese newspapers began reporting tank losses as tactical withdrawals and strategic repositioning, rather than acknowledging destruction by American weapons. Radio broadcasts emphasized the spiritual strength of Japanese defenders while minimizing references to material losses. These propaganda efforts, while temporarily successful in maintaining public support, prevented honest assessment of military capabilities and hindered development of effective countermeasures. The development of Japanese anti-bazooka tactics revealed the desperation of military planners confronting superior enemy technology. Training manuals issued in September 1944 instructed Japanese infantry to identify bazooka teams by their distinctive rocket smoke and engage them with rifle fire before they could reload. These tactics proved largely ineffective due to the bazooka's range advantage and the difficulty of locating concealed American positions in jungle and coral terrain. More sophisticated countermeasures included attempts to develop Japanese rocket weapons comparable to American bazookas. The Type 4 70mm anti-tank rocket launcher, rushed into limited production during late 1944, represented Japan's technological response to American innovation. However, material shortages, manufacturing limitations, and insufficient testing time produced a weapon inferior in range, accuracy, and reliability to the American systems it was designed to counter. Japanese rocket development efforts highlighted the broader technological gap that bazookas had exposed. While American research and development programs benefited from extensive university cooperation, unlimited funding, and access to global raw materials, Japanese efforts were constrained by resource shortages, isolation from international scientific communities, and diversion of talent to immediate military needs rather than long-term research. The strategic bombing campaign against Japanese home islands accelerated the technological disparity by destroying research facilities, killing experienced engineers, and disrupting communication between military planners and industrial producers. By early 1945, Japanese weapons development had effectively ceased, while American innovation continued producing increasingly sophisticated anti-tank weapons, including the improved M9 bazooka with enhanced range and penetrating power. The final phase of Pacific warfare demonstrated the cumulative impact of American technological superiority symbolized by the bazooka. During the Battle of Okinawa, Japanese forces abandoned all attempts at mobile defense, instead constructing elaborate underground positions designed to neutralize American weapons advantages. This strategy, while inflicting heavy casualties on attacking forces, represented complete abandonment of offensive capabilities, and acknowledgement that Japanese forces could only delay rather than prevent American victory. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima, commanding Japanese forces on Okinawa, exemplified this defensive mindset in his final messages to Tokyo. "American rocket weapons have made conventional military operations impossible," Ushijima reported. "Our forces can only hope to inflict casualties through defensive fighting in prepared positions. Victory in the traditional sense is no longer achievable against enemy technological superiority." The post-war analysis of Pacific theater operations confirmed that bazooka effectiveness had influenced Japanese strategy far beyond immediate tactical impacts. The weapon's psychological effect on enemy forces, combined with its practical elimination of Japanese armored capabilities, had forced strategic changes that accelerated American victory while minimizing American casualties in subsequent campaigns. General Douglas MacArthur, in his post-war memoirs, identified the bazooka as one of the three most significant American weapons innovations of World War II, alongside radar and the atomic bomb. The bazooka gave our infantry the confidence to face enemy armor independently, MacArthur wrote. This psychological advantage was as important as the weapon's technical capabilities in determining Pacific theater outcomes. The broader lessons of bazooka effectiveness extended beyond World War II into Cold War military planning. The weapon demonstrated that technological innovation could rapidly obsolete existing military systems, regardless of their previous effectiveness. This principle influenced post-war American defense spending priorities, emphasizing continued research and development programs designed to maintain technological advantages over potential enemies. Soviet military observers, studying American bazooka tactics during the final months of World War II, developed their own rocket-propelled grenade systems that became standard infantry anti-tank weapons throughout the Warsaw Pact. The RPG-2, and later RPG-7, while incorporating design improvements, followed the basic operational concept pioneered by American engineers: portable, shoulder-fired weapons that gave ordinary infantry soldiers the capability to destroy enemy armor. The proliferation of bazooka-type weapons during the post-war period validated American tactical concepts while creating new challenges for armor designers worldwide. Tank development increasingly emphasized protection against shaped-charge warheads, leading to reactive armor systems, electronic countermeasures, and active defense technologies that define modern armored warfare. If you've watched this far, you must have liked the video. Please write which city you're watching from in the comments, and if you still don't like it, leave a like. See you in the next video. The legacy of American bazooka innovation extends beyond military applications into broader questions of technological development and strategic planning. The weapon's rapid development from laboratory concept to battlefield dominance demonstrated the potential for scientific research to influence military outcomes when supported by adequate industrial capacity and strategic vision. Modern military planners continue studying bazooka effectiveness as an example of how technological advantages can be achieved and maintained through sustained investment in research and development. The weapon's impact on Japanese strategy provides lessons about the importance of adapting to enemy innovations rather than denying their significance or attempting to overcome technological disadvantages through superior fighting spirit alone. The story of Japanese soldiers initially dismissing American bazookas as toys, only to witness their tanks explode in devastating fashion, remains a powerful reminder that military success depends ultimately on the intersection of technology, tactics, and industrial capacity. In this intersection, American innovation, production capability, and strategic thinking proved decisively superior to Japanese spiritual determination and traditional military virtues. The bazooka revolution in Pacific theater warfare thus represents more than a simple weapons story. It exemplifies the triumph of scientific thinking and industrial democracy over martial tradition and authoritarian military culture. The weapon's legacy continues influencing military development, strategic planning, and technological innovation, more than 80 years after its first devastating employment against Japanese armor on the coral beaches of Saipan.